Good morning, second graders. Today is Wednesday, May 6th. Today for reading, we are going to do another story about ants. Remember yesterday we read the story Thinking About Ants, and today we're going to read a poem about ants. So on your matrix for Wednesday, May 6th, it says, read the ant chant 3 times to practice fluency. It is page 2 in your reading packet. Record yourself reading the poem on Seesaw if you can, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So please go ahead and get your reading packet and turn to page 2, and the poem is called The Ant Chant. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the poem. What we're going to do is I'm going to play the poem on my CD player. I don't know if we've done that at school or not, where we played some stories and poems on the CD player, but that's how we're going to listen to the story today, or the poem, I should say. And it's a fun poem about shrinking down to the size of an ant. So the poem is written from the perspective of an ant. So the reader that's reading is kind of shrunk down into the size of an ant. And so you're going to notice some things about the poem that were similar to our story yesterday. Remember in the story the ants were super small and the big piece of apple looked huge to them? That's kind of what the ant chant is like today too. So in just a minute, I'm going to go and get the CD player and play you the poem. But first, while we're listening to the poem, I want you to follow along on page 2 while the CD plays, and I want you to be thinking about some text-to-text connections that you can make between today's poem and yesterday's story called Thinking About Ants. And once we're done listening to that, we'll talk about those text-to-text connections. Remember, a text-to-text connection is how something is similar. So today's poem will be similar to yesterday's story. That's called a text-to-text connection. We learned about that during the school year, but maybe we've forgotten since it's been a while. So go ahead and get your packet. Make sure you're on page 2 so that you can follow along, and I will get the CD player going, and then we will continue in just a second. All right, before we actually listen to it, there's one other thing I wanted to tell you about, and that is when you see the first line where it says, wow, what happened? And then it says, look, we're small fries. Can you see the different print right here compared to the first part? That's because there's 2 different voices that are reading this poem. So when it has this type of print, that's one voice, and then it changes into italic print. That's the second voice. So there's 2 different voices that are reading this poem. So hopefully that will help you to understand the poem a little bit better. Okay, are you ready? Here we go.
Faster! Hurry! Keep on running!
What did you think of that? That was kind of a fun poem, wasn't it? We haven't read a poem that had two different voices like that. And how many of you knew when it said chorus, that was this part right here? We had to do it 2 times. And then after each verse, we had to go back to the chorus. So where it said chorus, my finger pointed back up here. And then we read the next verse, and at the end we did the chorus and had to go back. So good job following along. I hope that you were able to see that as I was pointing to it. Were any of you able to make any text-to-text connections between our poem today and the story from yesterday, thinking about ants? Hopefully, you thought of one that they were both about ants. That's a text-to-text connection, right? Both stories were about ants. Another text-to-text connection that I hope that you thought of was that they both gave facts about ants. So even though this poem was written in kind of a fun way, it still gave some facts about ants, right? Another thing was they were both written from the perspective of a tiny ant. So in this one, it talked about how the world was enormous if you're ant size, okay? And the dinner that they found was enormous and all those things. So that is a text-to-text connection too, just like in your book yesterday, thinking about ants when they were on the apple and it was so big, and the piece of cake and it looked huge like a mountain for the tiny little ant. So those were 3 text-to-text connections that I hope you thought of. And maybe some of you thought of even some other text-to-text connections that I didn't say. So great job today. So on Seesaw, there's an assignment that I put on there where it tells you to do a video to record yourself reading this poem. So remember on your matrix, you had to read it to yourself 3 times so that you could practice reading it, and then go on Seesaw and make a video of yourself reading it. Now, you don't have to sing it like the CD did. You can just read it. And if you want to read it where you have one voice that says this part of the line and a different voice that says that part of the line, that would be fine too. That would be really cute too. But you don't have to. You can just read it like normal if you want, and have somebody videotape you while you're doing that. And then I can see you too. That would be really fun. Okay. So for math today, we're going to do our math next. So please make sure that you have your math packet on page 579. So there's page 579, and it's the My Review. So this week we are going to finish up our bar graph unit, and next week we're going to start a new unit, okay? So remember, you don't ever need your math book for our learning. We talked about that yesterday in the video. What you need is your math packet, and that was in your distance learning folder. So that's what you need when we do math on our video. Today our matrix tells us right here to complete numbers 1 through 6 on page 579 in your math packet. So that's what we got out. We only have to do 1 through 6, so that's pretty easy today for math. So here are your word choices at the top for your review, because this is a vocabulary check. So here were some important vocabulary words. Remember, when they're highlighted in yellow, we know that those are important words. So we have data, picture graph, survey, line plot, tally mark, and bar graph. And hopefully those are all words that you know, because we've been working with those words for the last few weeks. Okay, so I will read the question for you. And if you have a pencil with you right now, you can go ahead and fill it in and be all done with math before we're even done. So number 1, you can collect data by asking people the same question in a blank. So one of those 6 words goes in that blank. Which one? Number 2, a blank uses bars to show data. So if you know it, write it down. Number 3, numbers or symbols that show information are called blank. Number 4, a blank shows how often a certain number occurs in data. Number 5, a blank uses pictures to show information collected. And the last one for today, a blank is a mark used to record data collected in a survey? So hopefully those are ones that you will know and it won't be too hard. So good luck. I know you can do it. And I will be back with you tomorrow for another reading lesson and another math lesson. Have a wonderful day, second grade. Goodbye.